Say hi to the Orcas, my daughter-in-law, Chloe, whispered, her breath a warm puff of poison against my ear. A second later, her hands were on my back and the solid deck of the boat vanished. My son, Michael, my only child, just stood there. He watched me fall. He smiled. Their plan was to steal my entire fortune, the legacy my late husband and I had built over 40 years. But they made one mistake. They thought the icy waters of the Pacific would be the end of me. When they returned home that night, I was waiting for them, and I had brought their worst nightmare with me. If you're watching this, I'm glad you're here. Before I dive into how a perfectly lovely Tuesday morning led to me being thrown overboard, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I'd love to know where you're all watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments and let me know what time it is where you are. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this. All right, let me back up. My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen most of what life had to offer. My husband, Richard, had passed away 2 years prior, leaving me with his Seattle-based software empire and a silence in our big house on Queen Anne Hill that was louder than any rock concert. Richard was my rock, my partner in everything. I remember when we first bought that house. He stood on the empty plot of land, pointed towards the Space Needle, and said, "Ellie, one day our grandkids will watch the fireworks from this window." The memory was a dull ache in my chest, a constant reminder of a future that would never be. For 6 weeks, I'd been recovering from a hip replacement, a painful, frustrating process that left me feeling vulnerable, and if I'm being honest, incredibly lonely. The days blurred into a haze of physical therapy, pain medication, and staring out at the gray Seattle sky. That's when Michael and Chloe started their campaign. At first, it was a welcome change. The calls had become infrequent since Richard died, replaced by clipped, impersonal texts from their assistants. But suddenly, they were all concerned. "How's the hip, Mom?" Michael would ask, his voice dripping with a syrupy warmth I hadn't heard in years. It was the voice he used as a boy when he wanted a later curfew. Chloe would stop by with organic soups in glass jars, fussing over my pillows and asking if I needed help sorting through my mail. "Oh, this all looks so complicated, Eleanor. You shouldn't have to worry about all this family finances stuff while you're recovering." They spoke of the burden of my estate, the complexity of the trusts Richard had set up to ensure I was cared for, and how they wanted to help me simplify things. It was a well-rehearsed performance, a slow, methodical grooming. They were testing the waters, seeing how much I would let them in, how much I would trust them with the keys to my kingdom. They'd talk about my memory lapses, small things they'd orchestrated. An appointment with my cardiologist I'd forgotten, one Chloe had actually canceled without my knowledge. A set of heirloom coral earrings she'd found in the pantry after moving them there herself. They planted seeds of doubt, not just with me, but with my friends, mentioning in hushed, worried tones over the phone about my cognitive decline. It was insidious, a slow-acting poison I was too thirsty for affection to recognize. The final act of this play came on a crisp Tuesday morning. Michael called, not his assistant, which should have been the first blaring red flag. "Mom, we bought a boat. She's beautiful. We want to take you out on the Puget Sound, just the 3 of us. A little celebration for your recovery." A celebration. The word felt like a balm on my lonely heart. I pictured the gentle rocking of the boat, the salty air, my family around me, a return to the way things used to be before Richard was gone and money had become a silent, ugly barrier between us. The hope was so blinding, it completely obscured the warning signs. I agreed, my voice thick with an emotion I mistook for happiness. I spent an hour choosing what to wear, settling on the cashmere sweater Richard always said brought out the blue in my eyes. I felt a flutter of anticipation, a feeling I hadn't had in a long, long time. I was walking into my own ambush, dressed for a party. I packed a small bag, choosing that cashmere sweater, never imagining it would be the last time I'd ever feel safe with my own family. The boat was named The Inheritance. I saw the gold letters on the stern as I walked down the dock at Shoals Bay, and a cold dread washed over me. A feeling so strong it was almost a physical nausea. I should have turned around right then and there. I should have run. But Michael was there, his arms open for a hug, his face a perfect mask of filial devotion. The weakness in me, the part that still wanted to believe in the son I had raised, won out over my screaming instincts. The vessel itself was a monument to obscene wealth, all gleaming white fiberglass and polished teak. It smelled of new leather and my money. As I stepped aboard, Chloe greeted me, air-kissing both my cheeks. She was wearing a white linen dress that looked like it cost $1,000 and oversized sunglasses that hid her eyes, but not the sharp, predatory line of her mouth. The first hour was a masterpiece of deception. We sailed out into the Sound, the Seattle skyline shrinking behind us, a jagged line of glass and steel against the hazy sky. The air was cold, but the sun was bright, glinting off the water in a way that should have felt cheerful but instead felt sharp, almost hostile. Chloe served mimosas in tall, thin glasses, her manicured fingers clinking against the crystal. She was a flawless hostess, chattering about their plans to renovate my old house, the one I signed over to them after Richard's death because I thought downsizing to a condo would be simpler. We're thinking of a whole new kitchen, Eleanor. Italian marble, sub-zero appliances everywhere. She was describing my own kitchen, but as if it were a teardown. Then the conversation shifted. The questions started. Casual at first, then more pointed. Michael refilled my champagne glass with a little too much enthusiasm, his hand hovering over mine a moment too long. "Mom, we were talking to the financial advisor," he began, swirling his drink. "Mark thinks we should consolidate some of the trusts. He says the current structure is inefficient. It's just probate can be so complicated. We want to make sure everything is taken care of, for your own protection." "My protection?" I asked, setting my glass down on the polished table. The cold knot in my stomach was tightening. "I feel perfectly protected, Michael. Your father set up those trusts to be ironclad for a reason." That's when Chloe moved in. She slid onto the cushioned bench beside me, putting a cold hand on my arm. The chill went right through my sweater. "Eleanor, we're worried about you. You've been off lately, forgetting things, getting confused." She then began to list, with chilling accuracy, every single incident they had manufactured over the past few months. The canceled cardiologist appointment, the misplaced pearl earrings. She even brought up my birthday party last year where they'd deliberately given me the wrong start time. I'd arrived an hour late to what I thought was a quiet dinner, only to find 50 people shouting, "Surprise!" They had filmed my bewildered reaction, and now Michael pulled out his phone and showed it to me. In the video, I just looked lost and elderly, blinking in the sudden flash of cameras. The perfect picture of incompetence. "The doctors agree, Mom," Michael said, his voice hardening, all pretense of warmth gone. "We have it documented. We have affidavits. You're no longer capable of managing your own affairs." The pieces clicked together with a horrible, sickening finality. The faked concern, the insistence on handling my paperwork after the surgery, the power of attorney documents they'd brought to the hospital, claiming it was just a temporary measure to help with bills. My financial advisor, Mark, a man who'd eaten at my dinner table, a man Richard had trusted for 30 years, had stopped returning my calls last week. He was in on it. They all were. The beautiful day, the calm water, the gentle sun, it was all a stage, a beautifully set trap, and I was the star of the show, the fool who hadn't read the script. I looked from my son's cold, expectant face to my daughter-in-law's triumphant smirk. They weren't my family. They were vultures,
circling, waiting for me to finally die. But they had grown impatient. That's when Chloe pulled out a thick folder of legal documents and a pen. "It's for your own good, Mom," Michael said, his eyes as cold and gray as the Seattle sky. And I knew then this wasn't a celebration. It was an execution. I stared at the papers Chloe held out. My name was neatly typed at the bottom of each page, above a line that waited for my signature. Full and irrevocable transfer of assets. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was brutally simple. It was my abdication, my surrender, a death sentence on paper. "No," I said. My voice didn't shake. It came out low and steady, a sound that surprised even me. It was as cold and hard as the anger that was now a solid block of ice in my chest. I pushed the folder off the table. The papers fluttered to the deck like dying birds. I would like to go back to shore. Now. Michael's mask of concern didn't just slip. He tore it off and stomped on it. His voice was different. The son I knew was gone, replaced by this hard-eyed stranger. He stood up, blocking my path to the cabin. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," Chloe added, her voice dropping the pretense of sympathy. She stood up too, a predator enjoying the final moments before the kill. "Sign the papers, Eleanor. We all go home, we tell everyone you've decided to retire peacefully, and let us handle things. You'll be comfortable, taken care of." "In a nursing home you pick out, I suppose," I shot back, pushing myself to my feet. My new hip ached, a dull throb that was nothing compared to the agony in my heart. I raised this man. I held him when he had nightmares. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to be kind to animals, how to say please and thank you. I paid for his Ivy League education, his lavish wedding to this viper, the down payment for his first house. And now he stood there, his face a stony mask, nodding along as his wife threatened my life. The betrayal was so immense, so total, that it was almost surreal. It felt like I was watching a movie, a terrible, cheap thriller. But the cold wind on my face was real. The fear was real. "You're insane if you think you'll get away with this," I spat, my voice filled with venom I didn't know I possessed. "Actually," Michael said, pulling out his phone and starting to record me, his movements calm and practiced. "It's really a tragic story when you think about it. A beloved, elderly woman, recently out of major surgery, a documented history of cognitive decline, gets disoriented on a family boat trip, tragically falls overboard while her devastated son tries to save her." He panned the phone's camera around the empty expanse of water. No witnesses, just a terrible, terrible accident. I looked at the phone, its little red light blinking, recording my final moments. I looked at the vast, indifferent stretch of the Puget Sound, the gray-green water churning below. Then I looked at the two people who were supposed to love me more than anyone in the world. They were more frightening than any ocean. I straightened my shoulders. If these were to be my last moments, they would not see me beg. I looked directly at my son. "Go to hell," I said, my voice low and filled with a lifetime of betrayed love. That's when Chloe moved behind me. Her movement was fluid, silent. She leaned in, close. So close I could smell the expensive, cloying perfume Richard had bought her last Christmas. She whispered those final chilling words, the ones that would echo in my nightmares for years to come. "Say hi to the Orcas." The push wasn't violent. It was efficient, calculated, a firm, sudden shove to the middle of my back just as I was slightly off balance. I gasped, my arms flailing, grasping at nothing. The world tilted, blue sky, green water, the white blur of the boat. Over I went. I hit the water. It was a shock, a brutal, physical blow that stole the air from my lungs. It was colder than I could have ever imagined. A predatory cold that felt alive. It felt like being stabbed by 1,000 icy knives. As I fought my way to the surface, sputtering and gasping, I heard Michael's voice, a perfect imitation of panic, but I also heard Chloe, her voice low and businesslike, talking to someone on the phone. It's done. File the emergency petition first thing Monday morning. She's clearly not competent. The cold was a physical blow, stealing my breath. As my head went under, my last thought wasn't of dying, but of the pure, burning rage that promised I would not let them win. The icy water of the Puget Sound is a merciless thing. It doesn't just chill you, it paralyzes you, seeping into your bones, slowing your thoughts, and stealing your strength with shocking speed. My beautiful cashmere sweater, once a source of comfort, was now a leaden shroud, dragging me down into the green-black depths. My new hip screamed in protest, a sharp, electric pain that shot through my entire body. For a long, terrifying moment, I thought, this is it. They've won. Richard, I'm so sorry.
I kicked off my expensive, waterlogged shoes, a desperate, clumsy motion that exhausted me. The rage I felt just moments before was being extinguished by the crushing, relentless cold. I broke the surface, gasping for air that felt like shards of glass in my lungs, just in time to see the inheritance speeding away toward the horizon. It was a white scar on the blue water, not even looking back. They were actually leaving me here to die. A wave of utter desolation washed over me, colder than the water itself. That's when I saw it. It wasn't a yacht. It was an old, rust-streaked fishing boat, the kind you see chugging along the coast every day, its hull painted a faded but cheerful blue. Its engine was a low, steady thrum, a sound that was suddenly the most beautiful music I had ever heard. It was still a long way off, a speck, but it was there. Hope, fierce and desperate, flared in my chest. I waved an arm, a pathetic, feeble gesture, and shouted, my voice swallowed by the wind and the waves. Help! Please, help me! The boat seemed to pause, and then, miraculously, it changed course. It moved slowly, carefully toward me. As it got closer, I could see a man at the helm, his face weathered from decades on the ocean, his silver hair whipped by the wind. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and deep concern. He cut the engine as he neared me and expertly threw a bright orange life preserver into the water just a few feet away. "Hang on, ma'am! I've got you!" he yelled, his voice a welcome, human sound in the vast emptiness. With the very last of my strength, I paddled towards the ring and grabbed it, my numb fingers barely able to close around the coarse material. He hauled me toward the boat, his arms thick with muscle, surprisingly strong. As he pulled me over the side, I collapsed onto the deck, a shivering, sputtering heap. I was alive. I was freezing and in agony, but I was alive. He wrapped me in a rough wool blanket that smelled of salt, diesel, and honesty. "Holy hell, lady," he said, his voice gruff but kind, kneeling beside me. "What in God's name happened to you? We saw that fancy boat take off like a bat out of hell." I was shivering too hard to speak, my teeth chattering like castanets. He helped me sit up and handed me a steaming metal thermos of hot, black coffee. It was bitter and strong, and as the warmth spread through me, I looked at his face properly for the first time. There was something familiar in his steady blue eyes. My family. They left me." He stared at me, his brow furrowed. Then his eyes widened in recognition. "Wait a minute. I know you. You're Eleanor Vance. You're Richard Vance's wife." I nodded, utterly confused. "How?" He extended a calloused hand, which I was too weak to shake.
Frank Kowalski. I served with Richard, Marines, a long, long time ago. After we got out, well, he helped me get on my feet. He co-signed the loan for me to buy this very boat. No questions asked. Said it was what brothers do. He looked out at the empty stretch of water where my son's boat had been, his expression hardening into a cold fury. What kind of people leave someone like you floating in the middle of the ocean? The kind who stand to inherit a fortune if I'm not around, I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. The pieces were falling into place, but this one, this incredible coincidence, was a gift from fate. Or maybe a final gift from Richard. Frank got on his radio. "This is the Salty Dog calling Coast Guard. We have a woman overboard." "No!" I grabbed his arm, my grip surprisingly strong. "Please, don't let them know you found me. Not yet." He studied my face, his sharp eyes seeing more than just a half-drowned old woman. He saw the fear, but he also saw the fire underneath it. He saw a fighter. He nodded slowly, then keyed the radio again. "Coast Guard, this is the Salty Dog. False alarm. Thought we saw something in the water. Turned out to be debris. All clear." He looked down at me, his face set with a fierce loyalty that I hadn't seen since my husband died. "Richard saved my life once. Looks like it's my turn to return the favor for his family." That's when the plan for my revenge began to take shape. Frank didn't take me back to Seattle. That would have been a death sentence. Instead, he steered the Salty Dog south, hugging the coastline to a small, forgotten fishing town on the Washington coast, a place of peeling paint, the constant cry of gulls, and the kind of anonymity you can only find in places the world is left behind. He knew a woman there, he said, a woman who owed him a favor, and, more importantly, a woman who knew how to keep her mouth shut. Her name was Mrs. Davis, a tough-as-nails widow in her 70s who ran a small guest house called the Foghorn at the edge of town. It was a simple, clean place that smelled of lemon polish and sea air. She took one look at my bedraggled state, my borrowed clothes from Frank's emergency kit, and the haunted look in my eyes. She listened to Frank's 5-minute, heavily edited explanation and simply nodded. There was a profound understanding in her gaze. She was a woman who had seen her share of life's storms. "Room 3 is ready," she said, her voice raspy but kind. "It's got its own entrance around back. Long as you're not bringing the law to my door, you're welcome here for as long as you need." That night, while my son and daughter-in-law were no doubt performing their roles as the grieving family, giving tearful statements to the police about their tragically missing mother, I sat in Mrs. Davis's warm, cozy kitchen, wearing a borrowed flannel nightgown, and plotted their destruction. Frank sat across from me, a fierce look of loyalty on his face, a silent promise of his support. The first step was to understand the narrative they were spinning. Mrs. Davis had an old, clunky desktop computer in her little office. I spent hours online, my fingers clicking with a new, cold purpose. It was all there, more polished and persuasive than I could have imagined. News articles from major Seattle media outlets. Tech widow Eleanor Vance lost at sea in a tragic boating accident. They painted a heartbreaking picture of me, a confused elderly woman, lovingly cared for by her devoted son and daughter-in-law, who had wandered too close to the edge of the boat. Michael was quoted extensively, his words like little drops of poison, expertly crafted to elicit sympathy. "We were so worried about her memory issues. She seemed confused that day. We should have never let her near the water. This will haunt me forever." They'd even released a photo of me to the press, the one from my birthday party where I looked disoriented and frail. They had built their case brick by brick, lie by lie. The obituary was already online. It was beautifully written, full of loving memories, most of which were fabricated. It requested that, in lieu of flowers, donations be made to a prominent Alzheimer's research foundation. The audacity was breathtaking. I felt a wave of despair so profound it almost buckled me. How could I fight this? They had money, high-powered lawyers, and a story the world seemed ready to believe. Who would believe me? A dead woman. It's at this point in my story, as I sat there in that stranger's kitchen, legally dead and slandered in the press, that I have to ask you something. If you were in my shoes, what would your first move have been? Would you have picked up the phone and gone straight to the police, hoping they'd believe you? Or would you have done what I did and decided that the system had already failed you? Let me know in the comments. It's a question I've asked myself 1,000 times. A few days later, Frank found a live stream of my own memorial service online. It was a lavish affair at the Seattle Yacht Club. I watched it on that old computer, my face reflected in the screen like a ghost. I saw my neighbor, Susan, crying openly. My book club friends were there, looking heartbroken. And my son, my Michael, stood at the podium, his voice thick with fake emotion, weeping over my empty casket, talking about what a wonderful, if troubled, mother I'd been. Watching him perform that monstrous lie, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. Despair was a luxury I couldn't afford. What I needed was information. What I needed was justice. What I needed was revenge. I opened a notebook and made a list. Not of my assets, but of the people who had to be in on this with him. My financial advisor, Mark. My lawyer, Patricia. The people who were conspicuously absent from my funeral. I swore I would take them all down one by one. Being dead has its advantages. You become invisible. No one is looking for you. No one expects you. You are a ghost, and a ghost can go anywhere, haunt any house it chooses, and I intended to haunt mine. I need to get into my house, I told Frank a week after my death. We were sitting on Mrs. Davis's porch watching the fog roll in from the Pacific. Ellie, that's insane, he said, using the nickname only Richard had ever used, his voice tight with concern. They'll be there or they'll have someone watching the place. It's the first place they'd look if they suspected anything. No, I said, showing him the printouts from the property records I'd found online. They kept their own condo in Bellevue. My house, the one on Queen Anne Hill, is sitting empty. But someone is paying the utilities, the electricity, the water, the heat. Someone is keeping it warm. Why would they do that for an empty house? That night, Frank drove me back to the city, his old truck a silent, unassuming vessel moving through the darkness. The familiar streets of my old neighborhood felt alien, the beautifully maintained homes of my friends and neighbors holding no comfort, only the risk of being seen. He dropped me off 3 blocks away, and I slipped into the shadows. I was a 67-year-old woman with a new hip, a stolen key house, and the grim determination of a soldier going behind enemy lines. I was about to commit breaking and entering into my own life. I still had my key. In their breathtaking arrogance, they never thought to ask it back. I slipped around to the back door, the one that led through the rose garden Richard had so meticulously cared for. The lock turned with a soft, familiar click, a sound that echoed the betrayal in my heart. The house was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. It smelled different, not of my lavender potpourri, but of a faint, sweet perfume I recognized as Chloe's. The air was wrong. Using a small, powerful flashlight Frank had given me, I moved through the rooms that held 40 years of my memories. The living room furniture, my treasured antiques, were draped in white sheets like corpses. But I could see new pieces had been added. An ugly, modern glass coffee table that clashed with everything. A massive, soulless television that took up an entire wall. In the kitchen, the Sub-Zero refrigerator, which usually held little more than yogurt and Pellegrino when I lived there, was fully stocked. Not with staples, but with fresh, expensive food. Imported cheeses, organic produce, bottles of boutique wine from Napa. Someone wasn't just visiting here. Someone was living here, hiding in plain sight. But the real discovery, the one that blew the conspiracy wide open, was in Richard's old study, the one place I thought they wouldn't dare to defile. The mahogany desk was covered in papers, a chaotic mess of legal and financial documents. And sitting right in the middle of it all was a laptop, not mine, left open and glowing in the dark room. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. The screen showed an open folder. The folder was labeled The Eleanor Project. My own name turned into a code word for my elimination. I sat in Richard's chair, my heart hammering against my ribs, and clicked it open. It was all there. A meticulous, detailed timeline going back 18 months. Emails between Michael, Chloe, and my financial advisor, Mark, plotting every step. Scanned reports from a doctor I'd never met in my life, diagnosing me with early-stage dementia based on observations and videos provided by my son. A list of all my assets with detailed notes on how to liquidate them quickly and quietly once I was gone. They'd even been selling off small blocks of my stock portfolio for months, creating a fraudulent paper trail of erratic financial activity to support their claims of my incompetence. It was a meticulous, cold-blooded corporate takeover of my life. I photographed every single file on that screen with a disposable camera Frank had given me, my hands shaking with a rage so profound it made me feel dizzy. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime of greed. This was a long, calculated campaign to systematically dismantle and erase me. But just as I was about to leave, my flashlight beam caught a pile of receipts on the corner of the desk, tucked under a legal pad. Receipts from a high-end baby boutique in University Village. Receipts for a crib, a designer stroller, cases of expensive European formula, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of baby supplies. And then I heard it. A sound from the room directly above the study that froze my blood in my veins. It was the faint, unmistakable cry of a newborn baby. A baby? My mind reeled, struggling to connect this impossible sound with the cold, hard facts of the conspiracy I had just uncovered. It didn't make any sense. Michael and Chloe had always been adamant, almost coldly so, about not wanting children. Chloe was obsessed with her figure and her career as a vapid social media influencer. Michael always parroted her lines, saying he wasn't ready for the responsibility, that their lives were too full already. Had that been a lie? Was there any part of their lives that wasn't a complete fabrication? I had to see. I had to know. Driven by a force I didn't understand, I crept out of the study and up the grand staircase, my hand trailing along the familiar, smooth wood of the banister. I avoided the 5th and 9th steps, the ones I knew would creak. The crying was coming from my old guest room, the one with the sweeping view of the Speedleville. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of soft, warm light spilling into the dark hallway. I held my breath and peered inside.
In the gentle glow of a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon, I saw a world I didn't recognize. The room had been transformed. My antique furniture was gone, replaced by a modern, sterile-looking white crib. A changing table was laden with diapers and creams. An expensive-looking baby monitor sat on a dresser, its little green light blinking rhythmically. And inside the crib, a tiny, perfect infant, wrapped in a blue blanket, was waving its little fists in the air, its face red and crumpled as it cried. A wave of profound, dizzying confusion washed over me. Who was this child? And what were they doing with him in my house, the very epicenter of their monstrous plan? I had to get out. This was too much, too dangerous. This changed everything. I backed away slowly, my mind a whirlwind of questions. A secret baby. It was a loose thread, a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit, and it scared me more than anything I had discovered so far. I slipped out of the house as silently as I had entered, my heart pounding not just with rage, but with a new, terrifying sense of dread. Back in Frank's beat-up truck, parked in the shadows several blocks away, I told him everything, my voice shaking. A baby, Frank. They have a baby in my house, a newborn. He was as stunned as I was. He turned off the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the gravity of my words. But why hide it? If they had a child, your grandchild, wouldn't that just strengthen their claim to the inheritance? A baby makes them look stable, sympathetic.
Unless the baby isn't legally theirs, I whispered, the horrifying thought forming even as I said it. Unless the baby itself is part of the crime. It's at this point that I have to pause here and ask you, can you imagine the shock? You've just discovered a meticulous plot to have you murdered and declared mentally incompetent, and then you find out your would-be killers are hiding a secret baby in your own home? It's the kind of twist you see in the darkest of movies. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in that moment. I honestly didn't know what to think. My mind just couldn't grasp it. Frank knew what to do. He put a steadying hand on my arm. He said this was beyond a simple fishing boat captain and a supposedly dead grandmother. He said we needed a professional, someone who knew how to navigate the dark underbelly of the world these people inhabited. He said, I know a guy who knows a woman. The woman was Isabella Rossi, Izzy. She was a private investigator, a sharp, no-nonsense former Seattle PD detective who'd quit the force because she was tired of the bureaucracy getting in the way of real justice. She had a small, dusty office above a faux restaurant in the International District that smelled of old files and cardamom. We met her the next day. I laid out the whole insane story, from the boat to the baby. She listened without interruption, her dark eyes sharp and intelligent, missing nothing. She took the disposable camera with the photos of the computer screen and my handwritten notes. Okay, she said when I finished, leaning back in her creaky office chair. This is a hell of a mess, Eleanor, but the baby is the key. People who go to these lengths to steal a fortune don't leave loose ends. That child is not a loose end. It's part of the plan. Izzy called me late that night, her voice tight with urgency. Eleanor, I found something. The baby doesn't have a birth certificate. Not a legal one, anyway. But I tracked the nurse they hired. She's a private contractor, and she was hired through a very discreet law firm downtown, a firm that specializes in what they call estate transitions for the wealthy elderly. The law firm was Simmons and Associates, located in a sleek, anonymous glass tower in downtown Seattle. On paper, they were a prestigious boutique firm specializing in high-net-worth estate planning. In reality, they were architects of death. Their legal pads were the blueprints for murder. Izzy Rossi was worth every single penny Frank and I scraped together for my hidden emergency fund to pay her. In just 48 hours, she had pulled the curtain back on a web of deceit so vast and so evil, it made my son's personal betrayal feel almost small in comparison. The head of the firm, the spider at the center of this web, was a woman named Laura Simmons. She was polished, respected, a frequent donor to political campaigns, and a member of several charitable boards. She was a pillar of the Seattle legal community. And she was a serial killer who never had to touch a weapon. Her business model, as Izzy laid it out for me over a secure phone line, was diabolical in its simplicity and effectiveness. She used a network of scouts, nurses and private care facilities, financial advisors with wealthy clients, even social workers, to identify wealthy elderly individuals with strained family relationships, like me. Lonely, a little isolated, with greedy heirs growing impatient. Once a target was identified, Laura would approach the relatives. She offered a full-service, bespoke package to accelerate their inheritance. Step 1, isolate the target. Create and document a pattern of mental decline. My canceled appointments, my misplaced keys, the ambush at my birthday party, it was all straight from her playbook. Step 2, gain legal control through fraudulent power of attorney documents facilitated by complicit financial advisors like my trusted Mark. Step 3, the final, irreversible step, if the target resisted or became suspicious, an accident would be arranged. A convenient fall down a flight of stairs, a tragic medication overdose, a sudden, fatal tumble from a boat on the Puget Sound. Izzy, using her old police contacts and her skills in digging through digital graveyards, found 5 other cases in Washington and Oregon over the past 3 years. 5 wealthy seniors, all of whom had died in convenient, plausibly deniable accidents shortly after their families had taken control of their finances with the expert legal help of Laura Simmons. It was a flawless, blood-chillingly efficient murder-for-hire ring disguised as a legitimate law firm. And Chloe, my ambitious, amoral daughter-in-law, was their perfect client. Izzy's deep dive into her finances uncovered a secret she had hidden from everyone, including, perhaps, my son. A massive gambling debt, close to $500,000, owed to a very dangerous syndicate in Las Vegas. They were putting pressure on her. She was desperate. Laura Simmons hadn't just offered her a path to greed, she'd offered her a lifeline from her own self-made disaster. Chloe was the one who pushed Michael, preying on his weakness and his resentment, convincing him this was the only way out. My son wasn't a monster, not entirely. He was weak, a ship without a rudder, easily manipulated by his wife's ambition and fear. It didn't excuse what he did, it didn't make me forgive him, but for the first time I understood the poison that had infected him, the desperation that had led him to stand by and watch his own mother be thrown to the wolves.
This new information was staggering. It wasn't just about my money or my stolen house anymore. It was about justice for the others, the ones who didn't have a loyal old Marine to pull them from the water. I looked at the files Izzy had sent me, the smiling photos of the other victims staring back at me from my screen. A retired professor from Portland who loved to garden. A wealthy rancher from Eastern Washington who had donated millions to animal shelters. We were all part of the same grim, exclusive club. The weight of it all was crushing. I felt like I was drowning all over again, but this time in the sheer, calculated evil of it all. I sat there in Mrs. Davis's guest house, legally dead, hunted by a network of professional killers, and now feeling responsible for a secret baby I'd never even met. But the most chilling discovery Izzy made, the one that turned my blood to ice, was about that baby. He wasn't adopted through any legal channels. He wasn't the product of a secret surrogacy. According to Izzy's source inside the nurse's contracting agency, the baby had been purchased. He was born to a desperate young runaway who had been promised a new life in exchange for her child. A young woman who, according to the clinic's sparse records, had simply disappeared right after giving birth. The runaway's name was Amy. She was 18 years old, from a small, forgotten town in Idaho, and she had come to Seattle to escape a violent home life. Izzy's investigation painted a heartbreaking picture of a girl with no safety net, no one to notice if she went missing. She was pregnant, alone, and terrified. Laura Simmons' network found her at a youth shelter in the University District. They saw not a person, but an opportunity, an incubator, a vessel to create the perfect final piece of their puzzle, a legitimate-looking heir for Michael and Chloe. They promised her the world, $50,000 in cash and a bus ticket to a new life in California after the baby was born. They told her she would be helping a loving, wealthy couple who couldn't have children of their own. They sold her a fairy tale, and in her desperation, she bought it. Izzy found a nurse who had worked at the private discreet birthing clinic in Bellevue where Amy had delivered the baby. The nurse, speaking to Izzy on the condition of absolute anonymity, her voice trembling over the phone, said Amy was a sweet, healthy girl. The pregnancy had been completely normal. But during the delivery, something went terribly wrong. Laura Simmons was there, personally overseeing everything, which the nurse found highly unusual. The nurse remembered Laura administering an injection to Amy, something she brushed off as a special vitamin cocktail to help with recovery. Minutes later, Amy went into cardiac arrest. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. The official cause of death was listed as an amniotic fluid embolism. It's a rare, tragic, and almost impossible to disprove complication of childbirth. A perfect built-in cover story. They had murdered her. They had coldly and calmly murdered that poor girl to get a baby, an heir, to legitimize their claim to my fortune and create a sympathetic narrative of a new family. The news hit me harder than the cold water of the Sound.
my own ordeal, my own son's unforgivable betrayal, it all faded into the background for a moment. All I could see was the face of this girl I'd never met. I saw her hopes, her desperation, her trust in the very people who were planning her death. A child herself who had died so that my greedy son and his wife could play house with her baby in my home. This was no longer about my money or my revenge. It was about him, that little boy, an orphan, whose very existence was built on a foundation of lies and blood. I had to save him. I had to give his mother's sacrifice some meaning. He couldn't be raised by those monsters. I looked at Frank and Izzy, my unlikely team of saviors, my new family forged in crisis. I said, we're not just going to expose them. My voice shaking with a new kind of fury, a righteous anger that burned away all my fear. We are going to dismantle them. We are going to burn Laura Simmons' entire empire to the ground, and I will not rest until that little boy is safe. The plan we hatched was risky, bordering on suicidal. It required another actor, an insider. It required me to step out of the shadows and face one of their pawns. Izzy had done a thorough background check on the nurse currently caring for the baby. Her name was Brenda, a single mother struggling with student loan debt, with a clean record and a reputation at her agency for being kind and compassionate. She was likely just another pawn in their game, completely unaware of the true nature of their employers. She was our only way in. They thought they had silenced a weak-old woman who was confused about her finances and a danger to herself. They didn't know that in trying to kill me, they had unleashed the only person with nothing left to lose and a reason to fight that was bigger than any fortune. My first move? I was going to pay a little visit to the nurse. Finding Brenda wasn't hard. Predictability is a vulnerability, and Brenda, a creature of habit, was predictable. Izzy tracked her routine. Every Thursday morning after her 12-hour night shift ended, she would go to a small, independent coffee shop in the Ballard neighborhood to read for an hour, a small moment of peace before heading home to her own child. The next Thursday, I was there, sitting in a corner booth, nursing a cup of tea, my heart a nervous drum against my ribs. She walked in, looking bone-tired, her nursing scrubs covered in smiling cartoon animals that seemed a cruel joke in the context of what I knew. She ordered a large latte and a pastry and sat down at a small table near the window, pulling a worn paperback from her bag. She looked like a good person, a kind person, caught in a very bad situation, and I was about to make her life infinitely more complicated. I took a deep breath, walked over to her table, and stood there until she looked up, her eyes wide with the mild annoyance of a stranger interrupting her quiet time. "Brenda," I asked softly. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" She asked, a polite but firm dismissal in her tone. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I believe you're taking care of my grandson." The color drained from her face. The name registered instantly. The whole city knew the name of the tech widow who had tragically drowned just a few weeks ago. She stared at me, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips, as if I was a ghost who had just materialized in the middle of her favorite coffee shop. "But you're dead." Her voice was a choked whisper. "The reports were premature," I said gently, trying to keep my own voice calm. "May I tell you a story, Brenda? It's about a little boy and his real mother, a brave young woman named Amy from Idaho." I laid it all out for her. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't make accusations, I just told her the truth, calmly and methodically. I showed her the picture of Amy that Izzy had found, a smiling high school graduation photo full of hope. I showed her the printouts of the financial fraud, the timeline of the Eleanor Project. I told her about the private clinic and the other nurses' suspicions about Laura Simmons. I watched her expression shift through the stages of disbelief to fear to horror, and finally to a deep, profound sadness. She looked down at her hands, which were trembling, tears welling in her eyes and spilling onto the table. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. Oh, God, I didn't know. They told me they were the biological parents, that it was a surrogate situation, all legal. They said they needed absolute privacy while they grieved for you. They lied about everything, Brenda, I said, my voice softening with empathy for this woman who had been so cruelly used. That beautiful baby boy isn't their key to a fortune. He's an orphan. And now that I'm alive, he's in terrible danger. Laura Simmons doesn't leave loose ends. If she finds out I survived, she won't just come for me. She'll come for him, too. He's evidence. He's a witness to her crime. Brenda wiped her eyes, a new resolve hardening her features. She was a mother. She understood the primal instinct to protect a child. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice no longer trembling but filled with a quiet strength. She was our way in. Over the next few days, Brenda became our spy, our soldier on the inside. Izzy met with her secretly and gave her a set of tiny, nearly undetectable recording devices and microcameras. Brenda, with her trusted, unquestioned access to the house, planted them. One disguised as a smoke detector in the study, one behind a painting in the living room, one tucked into a teddy bear in the nursery. She became my eyes and ears, reporting on Michael and Chloe's conversations, their comings and goings. They were getting nervous, she said. My death wasn't as clean and simple as they'd hoped. Distant relatives were starting to ask questions. They were jumpy. They were making mistakes. With Brenda on our side, the trap was now set. We had eyes and ears inside the fortress. All I needed now was the bait. And the bait was me. The time had come to stop hiding and start hunting. The element of surprise was my greatest weapon, and it was time to deploy it. Psychological warfare was the next step. We needed to rattle them, to unravel them, to make them feel the same terror and confusion they had so meticulously inflicted on me. Izzy, through her surveillance, had learned that Michael, Chloe, and Laura Simmons had a weekly strategy meeting every Tuesday afternoon at Laura's pristine, minimalist office in the Columbia Center. This was their time to review the progress of the probate, to tie up loose ends, and, I imagine, to gloat over their victory. It was the perfect moment to strike. That Tuesday, while the three of them were sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor, looking down on the city they thought they owned, a bonded messenger arrived at the front desk of Simmons and Associates. He had a small, elegantly wrapped box tied with a simple black ribbon. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Michael Vance, marked personal and confidential. The receptionist, knowing they were in an important meeting, brought it straight to them. Izzy was parked across the street in a beat-up van with a powerful telephoto lens capturing the whole scene through the building's massive windows. She described it to me later over our secure line, her voice filled with grim satisfaction. Chloe, ever the center of attention, took the box from the receptionist. A greedy little smile played on her lips. She probably thought it was a condolence gift from a wealthy acquaintance, another bauble for her collection. She untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, there was no expensive gift. There was only a single, perfect, hand-blown glass orca resting on a bed of black silk. And tucked beneath it, a simple, cream-colored card, the kind I used for personal correspondence. On it, in my own distinctive looping handwriting, were a few simple words. The water was cold, but my memory is crystal clear. We need to talk. Love, Mom. Izzy said the effect was instantaneous, a silent bomb detonating in the sterile conference room. Chloe dropped the box as if it were on fire. The glass orca shattered on the marble tabletop. Michael, Izzy said, went white as a sheet, physically recoiling from the table. But it was Laura Simmons's reaction that was the most telling. She didn't panic. She didn't gasp. She went preternaturally still, her face a mask of cold, controlled fury. She was the snake, and we had just stepped on its tail. The meeting ended abruptly. Izzy photographed them storming out of the building just minutes later, their faces a perfect picture of terror, disbelief, and rage. They got into their car and sped off, tires squealing, heading straight for the house on Queen Anne Hill. They were rats, running back to the nest, desperate to see if the baby was safe, desperate to understand how their perfect, airtight plan had just exploded in their faces. They were panicked, and panicked people make mistakes. It's about this point in the story, with the villains in a full-blown panic and my plan finally in motion, that I want to take a moment to thank you for sticking with me on this wild ride. It means the world. If you've made it this far, you're part of my team now. Do me a favor and just type the number 1 in the comments below so I know you're still here with me on this crazy journey. Your support is what gives voices like mine strength, and trust me, I needed all the strength I could get for what was coming next. They didn't know that Brenda had already been warned to be out of the house, taking the baby for a walk. They didn't know that the house was now a stage, fully wired for sound and video. And they didn't know that I was no longer hiding in a guest house on the coast. I was much, much closer. They were a bundle of frayed nerves, racing home to find answers. And that evening, when they rushed through the front door, expecting to find their safe little world intact, they were about to walk into Act 2 of my performance. I was sitting in Richard's leather air chair, the one by the fireplace. It was the chair he always sat in to read the Sunday paper. It still smelled faintly of him, of old books and his pipe tobacco. It was my fortress. I had positioned myself so I would be the first thing they saw when they burst through the front door, a specter in their stolen sanctuary. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't need one. My very existence, my quiet presence in that chair, was a bomb about to go off in their carefully constructed lives. The front door flew open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Michael and Chloe stumbled in, their faces pale and frantic, their eyes darting around the room. They stopped dead when they saw me.
Chloe screamed. It wasn't a movie scream, not a shriek of surprise. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure, unadulterated terror. The kind of sound you make when your worst nightmare, the one you thought you had drowned and disposed of, materializes right in front of you, calmly watching you. Michael just stood there, his mouth hanging open, his car keys still clutched in his white-knuckled hand. He stared at me, his eyes wide and unblinking, as if he couldn't process what he was seeing, as if his brain had simply short-circuited. "Hello, darlings," I said pleasantly. My voice was calm, even, carrying across the silent room with perfect clarity. "You look like you've seen a ghost. How was your meeting with Laura? I hope you didn't finalize anything important on my behalf." "You..." Michael stammered, his voice a choked whisper. "You can't be... We saw you... dead," I supplied helpfully, a cold smile touching my lips. "Yes, we covered that. Turns out I'm a stronger swimmer than you thought. And luckily, there are still good people in this world. People who don't leave their mothers to die in the ocean." Just then, as we had planned, Brenda appeared from the hallway, holding the baby. He was awake, looking around with big, curious brown eyes, blissfully unaware of the venom in the room. "Mrs. Vance asked me to bring the baby out," Brenda said, her voice trembling slightly, but her gaze firm. "She wanted to meet her grandson properly." "Her grandson?" Chloe finally found her voice, though it was a hoarse, ugly croak. Her terror was rapidly being replaced by a cornered animal's rage. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Brenda, this woman is... she's an imposter! Get her out of here!" An imposter? I chuckled. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the sound of shattered love and righteous fury. "Oh, Chloe, we both know who the real imposters are in this room." I stood up slowly and walked toward them. They both took an involuntary step back, as if I really were a ghost. I stopped in front of Brenda and looked down at the beautiful child in her arms. "Tell me, dear, when exactly did you give birth? Because when we were on that boat just a few short weeks ago, you certainly didn't look like a woman who had just delivered a baby." I looked up, my gaze locking first with Chloe's,
then with Michael's. "I know everything," I said, my voice dropping low, each word a carefully placed stone. "I know about the Eleanor project. I know about your $500,000 gambling debt, Chloe. I know about your puppet master, Laura Simmons. And I know about the poor girl you murdered to get this baby. Her name was Amy. She was 18 years old." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the baby seemed to hold his breath. That's when I saw it. The flicker in Chloe's eyes. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't even fear anymore. It was cold, hard calculation. She was already trying to figure out a way out. A new lie, a new angle. Michael, on the other hand, looked like he was about to collapse. The weak link. The boy I raised was still in there somewhere, buried under a mountain of greed and cowardice. I have to ask you, at this moment of confrontation, what would you do if you were me? Would you have shown them mercy? Would you have given them a chance to confess? It's a tough question, one that tests the limits of forgiveness. For me, it wasn't about forgiveness. It was about seeing just how deep their evil really ran. I gave them an ultimatum, a final off-ramp from the highway to hell they were on. You have 24 hours. You walk into the Seattle Police Headquarters on 5th Avenue. You ask for Detective Miller. Izzy has already briefed him. You confess everything. You tell them about Laura, about Amy, about the money. You cooperate fully. If you do that, I said, directly looking at my son, I will tell the district attorney that I do not wish to press charges for my own attempted murder. The other charges, I said, my gaze shifting to the baby, those are out of my hands. But I am offering you a sliver of a chance to save whatever is left of your souls. But instead of remorse, I saw that flicker in Chloe's eyes again, and I knew they had just made their final, fatal mistake. They didn't take the deal. Of course they didn't. People like Chloe and Laura Simmons don't confess, they double down. Their entire world was built on the belief that they were smarter, better, and more entitled than everyone else. Admitting failure was not in their vocabulary. Izzy was monitoring their communications from her van parked a few blocks away. The microphones Brenda had planted were now our most valuable asset, a direct line into the enemy command center. That night, we listened in on their frantic, whispered conference call. The recording was chilling. Michael was a mess, sobbing, pleading with Chloe to take my offer. "She knows everything, Chloe. We're finished. It's over." But Chloe was ice. She hissed. "Pull yourself together, Michael. It's not over until we say it's over." Then Laura Simmons' calm and chillingly professional voice came on the line. "He's right to be scared, but he's wrong about it being over. Eleanor has made a critical error. She has revealed herself, but she hasn't gone to the authorities yet. She's playing a game. She thinks she has leverage." "What do we do?" Chloe asked. "She's a loose end, Chloe," we heard Laura say, her voice devoid of any emotion. "A very dangerous one. She knows too much. We can't let her go to the police. This is no longer about the money. This is about survival. Our survival." "What are you saying?" Michael sobbed, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying," Laura replied, her tone as flat as a surgeon discussing an incision, "that we have to finish the job, properly this time, and we have to clean up all the other loose ends, too." My blood ran cold. The other loose ends, she meant the baby. And she meant Brenda. My plan to scare them to confess had backfired. I had only made them more desperate, more dangerous. Izzy was monitoring their communications from her van parked a few blocks away. The microphones Brenda had planted were now our most valuable asset, a direct line into the enemy command center. "We have to go to the police now, Eleanor," Frank said, his face a grim, pale mask in the dim light of Izzy's van. "This is too much. We can't handle this on our own."
"No," I said, a terrifying high-stakes plan forming in my mind, born of pure desperation. "If we go now, Laura will deny everything. She'll say we're fabricating the recording. It's my word, a dead woman's word, against a respected lawyer with friends in high places. Her network is deep. She could walk. And we don't have enough concrete, admissible evidence to tie her directly to Amy's death. Not yet. So what do we do? Izzy asked, looking at me, her sharp eyes searching my face. She's literally coming to kill you tomorrow night. I know, I said, the words feeling like ice in my mouth. So we're going to let her. The plan was insane. It was the biggest, most dangerous gamble of my life. I would be the bait. We would let Laura Simmons walk into the house believing she was coming to commit a triple murder. But this time, the house wouldn't just be wired for sound by a PI. It would be a federal stage. Izzy looked at me for a long moment, and then a slow, grim smile spread across her face. You know, she said, pulling out her phone, I quit the force, but I still have some friends in high places. Friends at the FBI who have been trying to build a racketeering case against Simmons for years. They just never had a witness who survived her estate planning. The pieces were coming together. We would give the FBI not just a confession, but a live performance. We would let Laura walk into our trap, talk her into a corner, and get her to admit to everything, from the financial fraud to the murder of Amy, all on a live federal wire. Brenda and the baby would be safely hidden in a secret panic room Richard had built in the basement years ago. It would be just me and the devil in my living room for one final showdown. The next evening, I sat in my armchair, the same one I'd been in when I confronted my son. I was wearing a wire. The house was quiet, but outside, in unmarked vans parked down the street, a team of armed FBI agents was listening to my every breath, waiting for my signal. The doorbell rang at precisely 8 p.m. It was a calm, polite, two-note chime, a sound so mundane it was grotesquely out of place with the horror it announced. I had instructed Michael and Chloe to let her in, to act their parts as the frightened, complicit children, and then to sit on the sofa and not say a word. They sat there now, pale and rigid, looking like statues in a museum of their own personal hell. Michael opened the door. Laura Simmons walked in. She was smaller than I expected, dressed in an impeccably tailored gray suit, carrying an expensive black leather briefcase. She could have been an accountant coming to discuss my taxes, or a consultant ready to advise on art investments. She radiated an aura of calm, untouchable professionalism. She smiled pleasantly at me as she entered the living room. Eleanor, she said, her voice smooth as silk, as if we were old friends meeting for tea at the Four Seasons. My clients, she gestured vaguely toward my son and his wife, have been so distressed. I'm sure they have, I said, my voice steady despite the frantic beating of my own heart. I gestured to the wingback chair opposite me. Please, sit. She sat down, crossed her legs elegantly at the ankle, and placed her briefcase on the floor beside her. She was all business. You have caused a significant complication, Eleanor, she began, her tone that of a CEO addressing a failing department head. My enterprise relies on precision, discretion, and predictability. You, Eleanor, are an anomaly, but every problem, no matter how complex, has a solution. And what solution do you propose for this anomaly? I asked, leaning forward slightly, making sure my voice was clear for the listeners outside. A more permanent one, she said without a flicker of emotion. There was no malice in her voice, only a cold, practical finality. It's a shame, really. You're clearly a very intelligent and resourceful woman, but your continued existence poses an unacceptable risk to my business model and the financial well-being of my other clients. I pressed on, leading her down the path we needed. Let's talk about your business, Laura. Let's talk about your other
Clients. The professor in Portland, the rancher in Yakima. Let's talk about my financial advisor, Mark. Let's talk about the doctor who forged my dementia diagnosis. She actually smiled, a thin, cold little smile that didn't reach her eyes. You have been busy. I'm impressed. But it doesn't matter what you know. A ghost can't testify in court. And what about Amy? I said, my voice dropping, becoming thick with the grief and rage I felt for that girl. The 18-year-old girl you murdered for her baby. What about her ghost? For the first time, her icy composure cracked, just a fraction, a muscle twitching in her jaw. The girl's death was a tragic, unforeseen complication of childbirth. Was it? I pressed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could feel the eyes and ears of the FBI on me, a silent, invisible audience. Or was it the plan all along? Just like it's your plan to kill me tonight and Brenda? And that innocent child who is now an orphan because of you? A tragic carbon monoxide leak, perhaps? These old Queen Anne houses have such faulty heating systems after all. She stared at me, her eyes like chips of ice. And then, in an act of supreme narcissistic hubris, she gave me everything. She began to lecture me, a monologue of pure, unadulterated evil. She explained her entire philosophy, how she was providing a valuable service to society, weeding out the weak, helping families access inheritances that were rightfully theirs. She saw herself not as a killer, but as a facilitator of the natural order, an agent of economic efficiency. She confessed. She didn't just confess to my case, she gloated about the others, naming names, recalling details, feeling utterly untouchable in my living room. Finally, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small, clear vial and a syringe. This is a purified potassium chloride solution, she said conversationally, as if discussing a recipe. It induces cardiac arrest almost instantly. It's quick, painless, and mimics a natural heart attack perfectly. The medical examiner, a dear friend of mine, will see nothing amiss. There will be no trace. She stood up and took a step toward me. This was it. The moment. The culmination of all the pain, all the fear, all the planning. I looked her straight in the eye. I didn't flinch. I let her get one step closer, the needle glinting in the lamplight. Then, I spoke the signal phrase we had agreed upon, my voice clear and steady, ringing with the authority of a judge passing sentence. Laura Simmons, for what you have done, you deserve no mercy. The front door and the back French doors burst open simultaneously, the windows shattered inwards as a dozen FBI agents in full tactical gear swarmed the room from every direction. FBI! Nobody move! The command was a deafening roar.
Laura froze, the syringe in her hand. Her face, for the first time, showed true emotion, pure, unfiltered shock and disbelief. She had walked into the perfect trap. As they slammed the handcuffs on her wrists, an agent turned to me. It was Izzy's contact. He nodded at me. Well done, Mrs. Vance. As they led my son and daughter-in-law away in handcuffs, Michael looked at me, his eyes pleading for something. Forgiveness, understanding, a memory of the boy he used to be, something I no longer had to give. He wasn't looking at his mother anymore. He was looking at the ghost he had created, a ghost who had just dragged him and all his demons into the unforgiving light. The trial was a media sensation in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. The inheritance lawyer, the headline screamed. Laura Simmons, with her cold demeanor and designer suits, became the face of a particularly chilling kind of white-collar evil. My testimony, along with the mountain of evidence Izzy had collected, and the flawless, damning recording of Laura's full confession in my living room, sealed her fate. She was convicted on multiple counts of murder, racketeering, and fraud. She will spend the rest of her life in a federal prison, a cold, sterile box for a cold, sterile soul. Her entire network,
from the corrupt financial advisors like Mark to the doctors on her payroll, was dismantled. 17 other co-conspirators were arrested, and because of our case, several other accidental deaths of wealthy seniors across the country were reopened. Justice, slow and grinding, was finally served for the other families whose lives she had destroyed. Michael and Chloe, faced with the undeniable evidence against them, took plea deals to avoid a trial. They confessed to everything. Michael was sentenced to 25 years. Chloe, as the more active and manipulative partner in the conspiracy, got 30. Michael writes me letters sometimes from prison, long, rambling letters full of excuses, self-pity, and pleas for forgiveness. He blames Chloe. He blames Laura. He blames his father for leaving us with so much money. He never quite seems to blame himself. I don't write back. Forgiveness is a journey, and mine hasn't reached that destination yet. Maybe it never will. But this story isn't really about them. It's not about the victory in the courtroom or the vengeance I so desperately sought. It's about what came after. The most important outcome of this whole nightmare was the little boy at the center of it all, the innocent life they tried to use as a pawn. With the full support of the courts, and after a lengthy but necessary legal process, I legally adopted him. We found Amy's distant relatives in Idaho, a kind aunt and uncle who had lost touch with her after she ran away. They were heartbroken to learn of her fate, but profoundly grateful that her son would be raised in a safe and loving home, and most importantly, that he would grow up knowing the truth about his brave young mother. His name is Ames Richard Vance. Ames for his mother Amy, so that her name is spoken with love every day. Richard for the grandfather he never met, but whose legacy of loyalty, embodied by a crusty old Marine named Frank, saved us both. It's 5 years later now. I'm 72, and my hip is doing just fine. Ames is a bright, funny, wonderful little boy with his mother's smile and Richard's thoughtful eyes. He has filled the crushing silence in this big house with the sounds of laughter and Legos. He knows his story. I will never lie to him. He knows his birth mother was a hero who loved him very much. He knows that the people who were supposed to be his parents made terrible, monstrous choices. And he knows that he is loved, fiercely and unconditionally, by a grandmother who would walk through fire for him. Frank and Mrs. Davis are his honorary grandparents. We have Sunday dinners together every week, a loud, happy, chaotic affair. Izzy, who now runs a thriving security consulting firm, sends him a ridiculously large birthday gift every year. This is my family now, a family forged not by blood, but by loyalty, courage, and a shared fight for what is right. I learned a bitter but valuable lesson during my week as a dead woman. Family isn't an obligation. It isn't a name on a legal document. It's the people who show up when you are drowning. It's the people who shelter you when you are lost. It's the people you choose and who choose you back every single day. I lost a son, but I gained a grandson. I nearly lost a fortune, and in doing so, I found a wealth I never knew existed. Thank you so much for listening to my story all the way to the end. It means more than you know. Please hit that like button if my story touched you, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of survival and resilience. My final question to you is this: have you ever experienced a betrayal that changed the course of your life, and how did you find the strength to build a new one? Share your story, or just your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and you are not alone.